the video nasty era, which is the kind of 80s mainly, is the most fascinating period for me, partly because I grew up watching these films and I grew up on a diet of VHS, but also because the reaction to these films was so extreme here, you know.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Stuetz. I am the head of the Panorama section of the Berlin International Film Festival. And today I'm very delighted to welcome our guest, Prano Bailey-Bond, who is the director of the film Censor. Prano Bailey-Bond directed in 2015 the short film Nasty, which traveled extensively the international film festival circuit. She was also part of the Berlinale talents, and Censor is her debut film. Hello, Prano. It's super nice to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to being with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and our film at the festival.
First, maybe you could briefly introduce your film in 2-3 sentences.
Censor is a psychological horror set during the video nasty era here in the UK, when there was a lot of social hysteria around VHS horror. And it follows a film censor working during that period who one day sees something in a film that takes her back to the day that her sister disappeared. And when she investigates the filmmaker, she goes on a journey that kind of blurs the line between fiction and reality.
I was thinking during the process of writing the film and your initial sort of spark, you know, what came first? Was it Enid, the character? Was it the video nasty setting? Or was it the job as a censor? Or was it all together? What kind of came first and triggered your imagination?
It was censorship, actually. So it's interesting you've divided them up like that, because definitely it was like censorship, a fascination with the idea of this job that's so unique that not many people in each country do. You know, and it's a job where I started to think, well, if violent imagery is meant to make a person commit violent acts, then what is it that stops the censor from losing control? And I started to look at, you know, censorship in the UK through all, you know, the history of censorship here. The birth of VHS led to a boom in VHS horror, you know, coming out, and there was no censorship in place for these films to be viewed in the home, and people were terrified of what this might do to society, that it was going to poison our minds and turn us all into murderers. And so that feels like really rich territory to be exploring the, you know, effects of horror film on people. But then from that, Enid grew, the character of Enid grew out of those, both the period and the role.
Yeah, I would also be interested to hear from you the link of Enid's personal trauma, because as you said, she's remembered or triggered by a memory that she sees on film of losing her sister, and also her work as a film censor. So what kind of possibilities opened up for you with that link of her personal trauma and her work as a censor? She's very outspoken about how she wants to protect people. So this was kind of very interesting to see how her personal kind of story is linked also with her work, her profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we were writing, we always knew that the lead character had something in their past that was possibly a violent, or at least a violent feeling experience that they couldn't quite reach. So we were thinking about the idea of memory and censorship and how our brain sometimes censors things for us. One of the quotes that really stayed with me through the research was something that David Cronenberg said about the censor that's driven to protect being the most dangerous censor of all. That there's like this moral responsibility. And I guess that I find that really interesting in the idea of censorship as well, that there's this nannying, you know, I say we, I was so small at the time, but it's the Thatcher era, and what was happening was, you know, this reported rise in unemployment, and you have mines being closed and a lot of protests going on, so a lot of unrest. But the easy scapegoat for anything bad that was happening in the country was the video nasties. how convenient is it that, you know, you can put all the blame onto a bunch of horror films that are warping people's minds, and the idea that that can kind of relieve, you know, the politicians, you know, that are making decisions that are actually putting people's lives under so much pressure. So we kind of tried to pepper the beginning of the film with some of that, because, you know, that's what I see happening in that period.
Also, how much research did you do? I mean, you said you grew up in that time and you watched already films on VHS, and so, but how much did you go back and rewatch certain films or discovered new films, you know, that influenced also?
Oh, loads. Yeah, it was great. It was great because me and my co-writer Anthony Fletcher, one of the first places we went was the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification is what it's called now. Because even though our film isn't set in the BBFC, it's a fictional censorship office. That's the closest thing over here to the censor's work. So just being in that space and talking to people there about the role, and then through contacts I managed to get in touch with a few people who actually worked as film examiners during the 80s. And so that was really fascinating to kind of talk to them about, you know, how the job changed under this kind of atmosphere of paranoia around these films, whether that affected their judgment. And I remember one woman saying to me that it felt very seedy working there sometimes, that she was sitting in these small dark claustrophobic rooms watching kind of like soft porn films, and she'd leave work and feel a bit gross. And those kind of descriptions are really helpful when you're even thinking about production design and the kind of look and feel of these spaces, you know, so everything kind of feeds in, and you're trying to be accurate, but also you're working within a kind of imaginative fictional world. So
talking when you talk about editing, what's really striking obviously is all the detailed work that went into the film, from the sets to the costumes to the hair, you know, to the cinematography and the editing, as you just described. And we of course are following Enid, you know, on her quest, and hence are always sort of in her point of view. We see the different worlds that she's seeing or imagining. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the collaborations you had with your creative team. I mean, that's a very big question, I know, but maybe there's something that you specifically want to mention, you know, when you created these kind of different worlds, from the sets to, you know, anything.
Yeah, I mean, every conversation with all my HODs came down to the character and how she sees the world, because, you know, the film is a very singular point of view, like you say. And obviously when I was casting Enid, I was looking for somebody who was, you know, gonna not just carry us successfully through the film, but who had something like electric about them that meant we couldn't look away from them. And for me, that's what Niamh Alga brought to, well, she brought a lot to the role, but that was one of the things that was like, she's got that spark that you just want to look, and she can put thought on screen through this really nuanced performance. But it's also a collaboration between the rest of the departments. So, you know, how does the director of photography frame that, you know, to feel like we're still in her head? So me and Annika Summerson were always talking about how do we make sure we stay in Enid's point of view, you know, and we talked about how we would stay close to her. But then the same goes with the production design and the costume and makeup. And I think the conversations we were having, as well as relating to Enid and how she looks and her environment, but also how she relates to the environments that she's in. So we'd have meetings, me and my costume production designer and DOP all together, where we would just talk about colour, for example, and how colour related to her journey. So she starts in this very kind of grey, you know, sort of bog standard in a way kind of world. And, you know, we wanted to take her from that world into this kind of lurid, vivid world of the video nasties, but still have it feel like one film. So, you know, we kind of weaved colour and ideas in and out of the worlds of the film. So, for example, you might go into a dream and there we start to introduce, you know, pinks or purples in the lighting. And then when we come back out of the dream, those pinks and purples are there in her real world. But it's very subtle, you know, and the same goes for the camera movement and the costume. You know, Enid starts very much aligned color-wise with her background. And as she breaks away from the world she starts out in, the costume colors sort of start to break away. So they're all, you know, all these little details that I'm pointing out, but we don't want anybody to notice. They all feed into that journey of the character. And it really is such a huge collaboration with every department to kind of tell that story and have us be in Enid's head.
And as you mentioned, the spectacular actress Niamh Algar, how did you prepare with her for the shoot? Was there time of rehearsal before the shoot, and how did you collaborate?
The person that you're going to work with that I'm going to work with is someone who's in almost every single scene in the film, and it's a very complex character. So I needed to know that I could really communicate with that person and that we were on the same page. And that was the thing with Neve was, you know, we just communicated so well, and we were talking all the time, constantly about Enid. She works so incredibly hard, but also has this kind of natural, you know, gift, I think, that makes you feel a bit spoilt as a director, because she's just got this incredible access to her emotions, and was quite mind-blowing actually working with her at times. I just think she was amazing. I had Niamh Algar and Nicholas Burns, who plays Sanderson, and I actually sat them down and made them watch some quite horrible scenes from Video Nasties, things like the turtle killing scene in Cannibal Holocaust, and things that could really help them understand that these people would sit down in a room and not know what was going to be put in front of them, because these films hadn't been seen by anybody before. And sometimes there were disturbing things that they had to watch. I wanted them to kind of click into that, because it's quite easy to look back now in hindsight at these films and go, oh, well, of course, it's like sausages for intestines. And, you know, it looks so fake because visual effects have come along such a long way. I kind of really wanted them to engage with the, you know, the other side, the more serious side of the role, I guess. So we did things like that and some other fun things in rehearsals.
Are there any new projects already lined up or kind of ideas in your head of what you want to do next?
Well, yeah, I would love to travel with the film. I'm really excited to see the film with an audience in a cinema, because that hasn't happened yet. But I'm writing a couple of original ideas that are really early days. One's with Film 4 and one's with Film Wales, both of whom I worked with or were behind the financing for Censor along with the BFI. And Anthony Fletcher and I are also kind of dabbling in an idea for television. So they're all very early on, so I won't say too much, but it's exciting. Yeah.
Lots of things to look forward to. Thank you so much for taking the time and being here today, and all the best for now, and hopefully see you soon again.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to be there.